This is 80-year-old Michael Jones. He left a woman fighting for her life after she was trapped underneath his car with devastating injuries after an incident in Liverpool city centre. The incident happened after Jones, a retired lorry driver, had been shopping for A5 writing paper for his wife at Ryman before hitting his car's accelerator instead of the brake as he attempted to execute a three-point turn ahead of his journey home. This caused the profoundly deaf 80-year-old's vehicle to fly backwards into and over unsuspecting pedestrian Maria Oginska before crashing into the Royal Court Theatre, leaving her trapped underneath the car. Medics desperately performed CPR on the dentist while her distraught cousin, whom she had been visiting from her native Poland, looked on in horror and fearing that her relative had died at the scene. Liverpool Crown Court heard yesterday afternoon that Jones of Sandown Avenue in Roby parked his Seat Ateca on double yellow lines on Queen Square while visiting the stationery retailer's branch in St John's Shopping Centre on the afternoon of October 29, 2023. When he returned to his car, which the then 79-year-old had left in a loading bay between the theatre and the Courtyard bar, he began to manoeuvre his car back towards Roe Street. Peter Hussey, prosecuting, described how Mrs Oginska had been walking nearby with her cousin Margazata Kozlowska and the latter's husband Norbert Kozlowski, whom she had been staying with on holiday at their home in Deeside, North Wales at the same time. He told the court, the defendant obviously hit the accelerator pedal very hard because his car moved very rapidly. This caused Jones's car to smash through a set of bollards and into an adjacent pedestrianised area. While the vehicle very narrowly missed Mrs Kozlowska, Mrs Oginska was carried on the bonnet of the car and then underneath as it continued, not stopping until colliding heavily with the corner of the Royal Court building. Mr Kozlowski was also hit by the Seat after attempting to pull their visitor out of its path, with CCTV footage of the incident appearing to show the rear driver's side wheel running over his chest. Mr Hussey added, another pedestrian behind that group had to flee for his life and just escaped being struck. Mrs Kozlowska looked on in horror and then ran to help her cousin, who was still trapped under the rear of the defendant's car. Mr Kozlowski picked himself up initially, but then appears to have fainted. He describes himself as blacking out with pain in his chest and body. Members of staff from the theatre and bar rushed to their aid before police officers arrived at the scene and lifted the car up in order to free Mrs Oginska. They then began performing CPR as Mrs Kozlowska watched on. Mrs Oginska subsequently spent an extended period of time in Aintree Hospital after suffering fractures to her spine, shoulder blade, pelvis and ribs, causing both of her lungs to collapse. She required multiple blood transfusions and 3 operations as a result of her grave and life-changing injuries. It was initially feared that Mr Kozlowski had suffered broken ribs during the incident, although a CT scan subsequently revealed no significant injury. He, however, sustained bruising all over his head, which left him in pain for months, while Mrs Kozlowska was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and left tending to her husband and cousin until the latter was finally able to return to Poland in late 2024. Jones subsequently attended a voluntary interview at a police station, during which he told detectives that his foot must have slipped from the brake onto the accelerator pedal. He has no previous convictions. Jones, who was not made to enter the dock and instead sat at the back row of the body of the court while assisted by a lip-reading interpreter, admitted causing serious injury by dangerous driving. He was handed a 16-month imprisonment, suspended for 18 months and told to pay court cost of £150 plus a victim's surcharge. Jones was banned from the roads for 3 years and will be required to pass an extended driving test before being allowed behind the wheel again. Mr Nolan replied, it is not his intention, having surrendered his licence, to sit the extended driving test. In terms of his driving ability and career, it has come to a conclusion. He will not be driving again.